This is Dwan Hearn, the moon, of course. I am sitting here with, is it Kiefer?
Kiefer, like Kiefer
Jenny-
Sutherland.
Jenny Kiefer. She is the co-owner
Yes.
of Butcher Cabin Books here in Louisville, Kentucky. One of the dopest bookstores I've ever been to because it's horror focused. Super, super tiny, but I love that intimacy. Just not even on the page, but just was that something that you thought of when you saw the space, that you noticed the intimacy of the...
Well, we are in a very unique situation with the store in that my parents own the building.
Fair.
So half of the business team owns the building, which was very convenient. And it just really, when people ask me like, we've had a few people reach out to be like, can you help me get one started in my town? And I have to really be upfront with them and be like, our situation is not going to be the same as yours likely, because we just got lucky in a lot of ways in that the building used to be my dad's business. So he still works there in the back, but for a long time it was just Curry Sound, which my dad owns, which he sort of like inherited from his dad, who sort of inherited it from a man named Mr. Curry who started it. And the building also passed down that same way. So it was owned by my grandpa, and now it's owned by my parents. So we got really lucky in that we had a building. They were looking for a tenant. And so my mom and I were like, well, let's try a bookstore. Louisville, Kentucky has a lot of horror fans, has a lot of people who love Halloween. And obviously, like, now we can sell things online. So we're like, let's try it out. If, worst comes to worst, we've lost a few $1,000s of our own money. But yeah, we had a lot smaller startup costs than most people because my parents owned the building, like the business didn't have to pay rent until it opened. Right. So we had all of that renovation time. We're lucky that my dad and myself and my spouse are very handy. We were able to do most of the renovations ourselves, which saved a lot of money. The wood paneling that's in there was original to the space. It was just already there, so we didn't have to do anything to the walls.
Makes a lot of sense. Cheaper that way.
Yeah, so we were able to save a lot of money when we were doing that. So it wasn't necessarily that like we saw the space and we're like, yes, this would be great. It was more so just like we had the space. Fair. And that was the space we had.
So what exactly inspired you, of all the businesses that were previously there and the businesses that your family have had, what inspired you to open a bookstore, a horror bookstore?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved reading and writing from a very young age. I've always been a bookworm and I've always been writing. I think I won my first writing award in second grade for a short story. On that. Thank you. That's the best one I've won.
So far. It's the best one you've won so far.
I think the only thing that could top it would be like a Stoker. And I always say I want a Stoker, but it doesn't have to be my Stoker. I just want the statue with the little door. So if anyone doesn't want their Stoker, I will take it off your hands.
I mean, just in case, if she will accept your Stoker on your behalf.
I will. You might not get it if I accept it on your behalf, but I will.
I mean, she never said she'd give it back. She said she would accept it on your behalf.
I will accept it for you.
Keep that in mind. That is fair. You mentioned that your family is just a line of business owners. So I guess you can expand this question to what you may have learned from your family also, but forgive my voice. What have you learned from opening that bookstore?
It's definitely been a big learning experience. Like I said, I think we had a lot fewer hurdles than most people who open a bookstore have. Just because of like the financial situation and the building, there wasn't as much pressure to like open it. We definitely had a timeline where we're like, okay, we want to open this in October because of horror and Halloween.
October, yeah, of course.
So we did have that timeline, but I think initially, but we didn't have the stress of like we're paying money, like a whole lot of money and like rent and utilities and stuff right now when we're not making profit coming in. So that was like nice to not have that pressure. But I think what I've learned, we're still learning. I think what I've learned is that like you can succeed with like a really niche store. I do think that, like I said, we got lucky with the location because on the street where the store is, there's like a vintage store at the corner. There's an art supply store. There's like a thrift store type place that sells like horror stuff too. There's an oddity shop down the street. So I feel like the street we're on in general just has like a lot of complimentary shops.
Yeah.
And like I said, we got lucky that Louisville is a market that can succeed with a horror bookstore, because there's a lot of people who are into horror here. There's a lot of horror authors who live here.
The surprise to me as well, as I got deeper into personally got into horror. There is a lot more horror community here locally. You mentioned the Oddity Shop. I've actually stopped into that place. It's about a block up the road from you. Have you gotten any support or any tips from like on a marketing standpoint on how to promote or push things? Like, have you communicated or cross promoted with them at all?
We do streetwide events, so not specifically with just that one store, but I think it was supposed to be today, but I think they moved it because of the thunderstorm warning.
Yeah, I heard the rain.
So I think it's on the 29th now of this month. They're planning to do it like a street festival, or block fest on the street. So it's more, I guess it's like the street wide has like a big community where we have like our own chat, and we try to plan events, and we'll probably do like a fall festival as well. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I think because I think having a good team for a business works. Just like my business partner, who's my mom, she has a background in finance, so she handles all the taxes and the money, and then I do most of the social media and the curation of the books as the author side. So I think we make a good team in that way.
What is your favorite retail moment? Retail's always been a fun place. What's your favorite little retail moment, real quick, that's happened in or around your store?
In terms of
the most a moment that stands out as a
well, there's a few of them. I think the biggest one would just be our opening weekend. We had but in August, before we opened, we painted the front of the building, and I posted it on my personal Twitter just because I had some authors who followed me and my friends, and I was like, they might think it's interesting, and it really exploded. That's the only thing I've ever done or posted that's gone viral in any way. And so that was wild. And so, but that was really cool that we were getting a lot of attention before we opened. But I knew I just wanted to paint the building beforehand, just to even months before, because I was like, I want people to know something's going in here, and just be like, ooh, something new, get people who are just walking down the street. But even going viral online, that translated into articles, the local news interviewed us. I was interviewed by NPR, and all of that's really cool, but that doesn't always translate to people actually showing up.
Right.
Especially if it's on the internet. And but that opening weekend, the first day, we literally had a line around the block, and people were waiting hours to come into our tiny store. And by the end of the weekend, we had pretty much empty shelves.
That's got to be a heartwarming and slightly terrifying moment, because you're wow, great first day. What are we going to do tomorrow?
Right.
For the record, because we didn't mention this, and if anyone's not seen the building, it's white with blood dripping down, and it's one of those things. I remember driving by it the first time when I was looking for it, and I was like, I wonder where it's a small little street, and the businesses are really close together. And as you're driving down the street, you're like, oh, that's the building. It's the one with the blood dripping down. Yeah. That's it. We'll go with that one. Well, so you're not just the operator of a business store. You're not just a business person. You are an author yourself. Yes. You have That Wretched Valley set to release in January 2024. What would you like to say about the book?
It feels like it's been a long time coming, but it's technically pretty fast for traditional publishing. I started working on it. I think I started really drafting it sometime in 2020. Right. And so 4 years from initial drafting to publishing is technically fast in traditional publishing.
Yeah.
But it just feels like it's taking forever. So I'm very ready for other people to read it. It's already gone to the printer, so I no longer have to read it again, which is fun. Or I don't have to read it again if I don't want to, right. I should say. It's been, and it has been nice. Some people have already read it. I gave out some ARCs at StokerCon to some authors that I admire, And it was wild that, when you go to a convention that involves reading and writing, you always come back with a giant stack of books.
Yes.
So
I have
it
about 3 or
was
4 in my room right now.
yeah, it was like a strange but yet heartwarming, sort of like the same as that opening day where it's like heartwarming but terrifying that there were like a number of people I gave ARCs to and they chose my book to read first, like out of this giant stack. And it was like, why? Like, why my book? But I mean, I'm happy, but I don't know. That was just sort of like a weird feeling after all this time where you're like working on it yourself, like sort of by yourself, maybe like with an editor, but it's really just like a few small people like reading and looking at this thing really closely to then like have other people excited about it is just a nice feeling. And I hope I can keep that buzz up for the next like 6 or 7 months.
Right. That's about half a year away.
Yeah.
That energy that you're talking about, that feeling, that kind of warm feeling that someone has chosen your book. Do you feel like a pressure from that? Like either from like I hope I don't disappoint or can I top this?
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of pressure. It is a little nerve-wracking to have somebody read the thing that you've spent, 4 or 5 years on. So it is kind of nervous to have it out there in the world. I think I'm just trying to avoid reviews. Like I'm not looking at Goodreads. I'm not looking at NetGalley or Edelweiss or Amazon or like anywhere there would be reviews. I'm not looking at them.
Right.
I can't stop people from like tagging me. So far, I haven't had. It's still really early. It's only been on NetGalley and Edelweiss for like a month, I think, or maybe a little over a month. So I do know that there are reviews that have been posted, and there's people who have finished reading it that aren't my friends, aren't authors that I gave an ARC to. But I'm trying my best to avoid reviews. I can't stop people from tagging me and stuff, but luckily so far I haven't gotten a negative tag. They've all been positive or like I just got this and I'm excited to read it. So hopefully I can continue that momentum because I think it's all, I mean, you're always going to get negative reviews or you can't write something that's going to be universally pleasing to everyone.
Of course.
And I think it is a rite of passage for a lot of authors to be like, I got my first 1 star. As far as I know, I think I have like a 2 star on Goodreads. I had to like get the description and notice that there was reviews, but I don't know if there's a 1 star yet because I'm not looking at it.
That would be painful
Yeah.
to just about anybody. Is that something that's like anxiety triggering or?
Yeah. I have a lot of anxiety around like, and it's my first book, so it's still everything's still new. I'm still a sensitive little baby debut author, and I think like I hit some of those hiccups when I was editing it. But I think like I think the more books you release and the more you go through the process, the less like hard it is, or the less like sensitive you are about it because you've been through it before. You know what to expect. But for me right now, it's like everything is still very new to me, so I haven't experienced it yet. I haven't had that like chip taken off my shoulder yet.
Of course. So not only are you like an author now, not even just a writer, you are an author now, and you are a business owner. What is more meaningful to you, the successful opening of a business or the successful release or soon to be release of the novel That Wretched Valley?
I mean, I think they're both meaningful in different ways. I think if I maybe like had to pick one, I might just pick the book just because I feel like I've been working towards that goal for a lot longer. And maybe it's also because of all those like lucky factors we had with the bookstore where it's like I didn't have to toil and scrape as much as some people might have had to do with that venture. So the bookstore actually came together, it felt like pretty quickly. I think my mom and I decided to start working on it in like 2021, early 2021, and then like a year and a half later it was open. And again, because like we had the space, we were able to do the renovations ourselves, so we weren't like waiting on contractors and stuff. And really like the main thing we had to do is we like there was like you've been in there, it's just like a big square
Right.
sort of, but there was like an office, so like, but those weren't supporting walls, so we just had to take those walls down, and then we redid the floor, and we like did the ceiling, had to like redo the ceiling grid and stuff, so it wasn't like a ton of work, especially since like the paneling that was already there just like went with the vibes of horror.
Yeah.
But we will be slowly, we don't have a timeline yet, but we will slowly be working on expanding a little bit more into like the back room.
Right.
So hopefully we will have more space for more things. That is kind of daunting to me because even though our space is very small, I think we fill it very well.
Yeah, it's very, very well structured. Anyone who happens to go in there will see that although it is indeed a tiny space, the space is very well utilized.
Yeah.
You don't have a huge countertop. All the shelves are all packed.
Yeah.
There's a tabletop with shelves, so you can go to the shelf and then tabletop.
Yeah.
From wall to wall, all the way around. There's books and art and all kinds of stuff everywhere. So you definitely utilize the space.
Yeah, and so I feel like we fill that space really well. And I'm like, what are we? So if we expand, I think initially that'll just be an event space for sure.
Right.
Because it'll be nice to have like a more open space for events. But like, I guess the thought of like, what am I going to put back there? Because we fill like our current space so well. It's nice to have more space, but like, what am I going to put back there?
Exactly. Now, your book doesn't come out until January 2024, and obviously it's July 2023 right now.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to read something of yours now, you have a story palette, right? And that's in House from the Dark Ages from 2022.
Yes.
You want to talk about that story a little bit?
Yeah, it's also available. You can read it for free on Pseudopod. They do a series where they like feature anthologies, and so they chose to feature that anthology, and then they very graciously chose my story palette to feature on there. So you can always buy the Howls from the Dark Ages anthology and read it in there with a lot of other cool medieval themed horror stories. But you can also listen to it if you're an audio person on Pseudopod. And it's so I wrote it for that call, which was like a medieval horror call. And I don't know very much about like medieval times besides like, the very stereotypical
King Arthur kind of
things that you think of. And so I was like trying to research something more interesting. I found some sort of like some story about my mind is saying Beowulf, but that's not right. But it was basically some sort of creature who would like steal pies off of window sills.
Okay. I think I know what the story is, but I can't think of the name of it either.
Yeah.
But Beowulf's not a bad shout either.
Yeah, but originally I was like gonna do something with that, but I just couldn't. It wasn't like really hitting me, or wasn't like vibing with me. It wasn't really coming up with anything. So I really don't know how I stumbled upon it. I think I maybe was just searching like just random medieval topics, and stumbled upon medieval makeup. And I really love research, so I was like excited about this call because like I don't know anything about this. I get to do a lot of research,
learning something brand new.
Yeah. And so I stumbled upon medieval makeup, and as I was like digging into that, I found this like amazing resource website that was like all about medieval makeup in Austria, and like they had videos on like here's how it would have been applied. They weren't using like the same materials,
obviously.
But yeah, it like detailed like all of the ways that they use makeup, and in that time it was like they used lead for like the white paste. They used like a toxic plant called bryony to like basically give themselves an allergic rash or like a rash on their cheeks to make them red.
That's so medieval.
Yeah, they would also women would like prick their fingers and basically like bloodlet to make themselves look pale with like ruddy cheeks.
That's extreme.
Yeah. And so that resource was great, and I love writing body horror, and I was like, this is perfect. They're using toxic chemicals and like bloodletting. So it was like a perfect combination for the stories that I like to write, which is body horror. And so I just sort of took that information and sort of like twisted it and pushed it a little bit farther into unreality and like what what is like the most extreme thing that could happen if you're like constantly using toxic makeup. So the story turned into a woman who lives in Austria as a textile worker, but she's obsessed with beauty, and to the point where like in the story she starts getting blemishes and she just goes to this extreme length to cover them up and to sort of consume herself with beauty and makeup. And I'm very proud of myself that I think there's like a couple of people who like know a lot about medieval things have said that my story is very like accurate, or like the application of makeup and stuff is very accurate. So I'm happy about that.
Do you, since you've already had something released, you've had this in the anthology, do you have anything else in anthologies anywhere else?
I'm not in any other anthologies. I have a story that was in Cosmic Horror Monthly in January called This Call is Very Important to Us, or Your Call is Very Important to Us, about sort of like an IT worker on an office worker who's on an IT call from hell.
Oh, wow.
And just things do not go well on that IT call.
As one can imagine.
Yeah, which was born from being very frustrated on an IT call. And then in, I think, September or October, I have another body horror story in fantasy and science fiction that's coming out. And other than that, I have been working on my next book, so I don't have any stories like ready for submission or anything.
Do you think the fact that you've had a couple of stories released, in various ways in magazines or anthologies, has that made it a little bit, has that softened the blow a little bit for the book release?
I don't think so, because I feel like Palette has gotten a bit of attention, especially since it's gotten on Pseudopod. And I think that the anthology Howls from the Dark Ages did pretty well. But it's still like a shock when people have like read that story. I'm like, oh, you've read like a thing by me? I don't know why. It's just like an unusual feeling. But I don't know how many people have read. I haven't really heard any people respond to Your Call is Very Important to Us. So I don't know how many people have read that. And then obviously only like editors have read the one that's about to come out. But no, I think like a book, it just takes so much longer. And especially in traditional publishing, it's so much harder to get it published that it just feels like an entirely different beast.
So it's kind of like that labor that goes into it, that the passion that has to go into just the time of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
It makes it more personal, more vulnerable, I guess is where you go.
Yeah, and it's I don't know, it's just like it's different to me because maybe because of the time and the labor, it takes a lot longer to just finish a draft of a novel.
Yeah.
It's the grind of like querying agents is very similar to the grind of submitting short stories. So there's still that same like rejection heartbreak that has been very similar. Like when I was querying agents and submitting short stories everywhere, that sort of rejection was like made me very sensitive, because at one point I was doing both at the same time and just getting rejection after rejection after rejection. But yeah, it's like the book is longer. It takes so much longer. Just like the process of editing takes a lot longer. So like for short stories, even going through that grind, it's really like it's usually like it can be less than a year between like writing it and it's actually like published. Whereas like a book, it's like I said, like 4 or 5 years is considered fast.
Right. So, I had the question and like just lost it.
Oh no.
How do you cope with that rejection? I can imagine that, many people have gotten a far more rejections than they have acceptances, unless you're just magical.
Right.
How have you coped with that and kept moving forward to the point where you kept going and then you put the book out anyway?
A lot of tears and sort of like letting myself feel that pain. I mean, there was like a few rejections that just like really hurt, and I was like crying a long time. So I am hoping that I can get better about it, but I honestly like was not taking the rejections very well. There was one point when a friend of mine graciously was like monitoring my author email for me, so I didn't have to see the rejections. I could just sort of submit And he would only tell me if there was like good news or like if I got a hold or if there's somebody accepted something somehow. So yeah, I would say not very well.
Well, I honestly, if I may counter that, I think that's actually very mature. It's a very good way of handling it, recognizing what does and doesn't help, and having a good support system around you that was able to,
Yeah.
get you through that. I think that you handled that very well.
Well, thank you. It didn't feel like I was handling it very well in the moment, but yeah, I mean, that was basically what I did, because I was like in this spot where it's like I don't want to stop submitting, because I know that that's the a great way to not get anything published is to just stop submitting.
Right.
And there was just this battle between like my objective brain, who's like, of course you're gonna get rejections, like it's a numbers game. But then the emotional side of my brain is like, but it hurts, and why don't they like my story? And so yeah, it was really nice of that friend to monitor my email. And it wasn't like it was like a huge chore or anything, just like see emails come in. But it was a huge chore for me personally to have to look at them.
Right. Well, I think that covers most of everything. Butcher Cabin Books, correct me if I'm wrong, is located at 990 Barrett Avenue in Louisville, Kentucky. Online at horrorbookstore.com. You have the novel, your debut novel of That Wretched Valley, coming out in January 2024. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, people can pre-order that my book, This Wretched Valley, anywhere, but if you pre-order it through Butcher Cabin Books at horrorbookstore.com, you will get like some pre-order goodies. So I'm working on some lino cut prints. So there'll be like a regular pre-order where you'll get like the lino cut prints, you'll get like a bookmark, and maybe like I'm looking into stuff. So we don't have like the exact things like nailed down right now, but you'll get goodies that you're not going to get anywhere else. And then I'm hoping to have a deluxe version with like a branded carabiner, because there's climbing in the book, and maybe like a tote bag or something like that. And then I'm also working with a local screen printer who does all of our merch to do like a small run of an alternate cover that's like exclusive and numbered and very small.
So basically what I'm hearing is we should all definitely pre-order this book and pre-order it through Butcher Cabin Books at horrorbookstore.com. I mean, if you're going to pay for the price anyway, you might as well get the goodies with it. Well, thank you so very much for sitting down with me, and I really appreciate you taking the time to just go over all this stuff with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me and talking with me and doing it TikTok style.
All right. That's Dwan Hearn. This is Jenny Kiefer. We're all out.